In this world, technology has advanced to the point where people can shrink themselves to just 5 inches tall. With this technology, individuals require a smaller amount of food, can live in luxurious mansions, and a few dollars in the real world translates to millions when you're miniaturized. Due to overpopulation and global warming, Norwegian scientist Dr. Jorgen develops downsizing, a process where people are transformed from their original size to only 5 inches tall. He gathered the first 36 volunteers who underwent the procedure, including himself and his wife. After shrinking them, they were placed in a breathable protective enclosure that is only 7 meters long to avoid danger from animals and insects. Inside this bag is all the garbage that 36 people produced in 4 years. There are almost no side effects, and even the first miniature babies were born. The news spread worldwide, and our protagonist, Paul, was amazed by this discovery. When he got home, he quickly informed his mother of the news, and she couldn't believe they could shrink a human to pea size but not cure her back pain. 10 years later, the procedure is done daily, with more and more people shrinking themselves due to a lack of food, water, and other resources. As small people need far less space to live, they can easily buy a mini mansion, eat only a couple of grams of food daily, and save their money. Paul is now working as an occupational therapist and lives with his wife Audrey. They are struggling with financial problems. Paul has always wanted to live in a bigger house, but he could never afford it. Paul and his wife attend a party, where he meets his good friend and his girlfriend. Dave tells Paul that this was not just to save the planet, but rather to save himself, and informs him that their shrunken community has the best houses, equipment, and doctors. With all their expenses reduced, they no longer need much money. Instead, they just read books, play music, and enjoy their days. This made Paul contemplate the future. After the bank rejected his mortgage loan, he and Audrey decided to explore the shrinking community themselves. They were amazed by what they found. A full set of diamond jewelry cost only $80. Their current assets, valued at $152,000, would be equivalent to $12 million in the shrinking community. They could buy a car, a luxury house, and everything they had always desired. They immediately decided to go through the procedure. Both of them quickly sold all their belongings and assets, quit their jobs, and said goodbye to their loved ones. On their way there, we can see that a bus has been developed to transport both normal-sized and small people. After signing all the necessary papers, doctors shaved their heads and removed their tooth implants. They injected them with the shrinking serum and placed them in the transformation room. Sometime later, everyone was downsized and scooped up with a spatula to be taken out in small beds. And they are taken to the doctors who are also downsized. The doctors reattached Paul's prosthetic teeth. When Paul woke up, the nurse handed him a cookie the size of an ordinary one, but in this world, it could sustain him for days. He asked about his wife's whereabouts, and she brought him a phone. Audrey started screaming at him because she didn't know they would shave her head and eyebrows, accusing him of making her go through it. Paul became enraged when he realized that Audrey had panicked and decided at the very last moment not to undergo the procedure. They had a heated argument, and now Paul found himself alone in the miniature city. On his way to his new home, Paul is devastated because he didn't think he would have to go through this alone. They took him to his luxury mansion, which was probably the size of a potato in the real world. So he is now rich and without his wife. It's a win-win situation if you ask me. Later that evening, he is watching the news about a Vietnamese lady who is protesting against downsizing treatment. A year later, he has to sign the divorce papers, as Audrey never went through the procedure. This is kind of awkward. She took half of his assets, so he had to move from his mansion to a much smaller apartment. He is currently working as a call operator. After work, he went to a birthday party where he met his friend Dave again. Dave tells him that he hates Audrey for betraying him that way, and Paul comments that downsizing was the biggest mistake of his life. While Dave encourages him to get back on the horse and suggests that single moms are the way to go, I couldn't disagree with that one, and neither can Paul, as we see him on a date with a woman named Christine. They talk about how this looks like a normal world, except there are no birds or insects. During dinner, Paul began yelling at the neighbors above because the music was too loud. One of his neighbors, Dusan, came downstairs to inform them that all the residents here are friends and politely invited them to join the party. As Paul and Kristen's date was coming to an end, he leaned in to kiss her, but was rejected. Angered and unwilling to hear her explanation, he decided to go to the party. He had the night of his life, drinking and chatting with his new friends. He kissed a few random girls and got incredibly drunk. When he woke up, he found himself on the floor of Dusan's apartment. Cleaning lady is there to clean the mess after party. Dusan started giving him advice on how to make money. He explained that people became small so they could buy and acquire things they couldn't normally afford. Paul could take the luxuries of the normal world and sell them here in thousands of pieces. As Paul went to the bathroom, he noticed the cleaning lady stealing medicine from Doosan's cupboard. He immediately recognized her. She is a woman named Lan, a protester against the shrinking surgery. She was shrunk against her will and put to small prison, which she escaped. Paul helped her adjust her prosthetic leg, and she mistakenly thought he was a doctor. She told him her friend was dying and needed his help. They got on a bus and traveled so far that Paul began to worry they would leave the community. When they arrived, he realized that there were also poor people who couldn't afford to eat, have normal homes, or even see a doctor. The woman informed him that her husband had died during the shrinking operation because the doctors had forgotten to remove his gold teeth, which caused his body to explode while shrinking. She also revealed that one of her friends had cancer but couldn't afford treatment, which was why she had been stealing painkillers. After doing everything he could, Paul had to go to work. But he couldn't stop thinking about the poorer part of the community. The next day, he returned, and Lan informed him that her friend had died. Later, when Paul tried to fix her prosthetic leg, he ended up breaking it. In response, he carried her around and cleaned houses for her. "This is me when I marry a rich fat woman." Some of the residents gave them food leftovers, which they shared with the poor and hungry. Paul quickly became beloved in this impoverished part of the community, helping people with their illnesses and in any way he could. One day, Doosan called for a cleaning service, and was surprised to see Paul among the other workers. He told Paul that they had a chance to make a fortune, and asked him to go to Norway with him to deliver a secret item. Paul agreed, and Captain Conrad would also join them. When they informed Lan that Paul has to go to Norway, to the first colony of the small people where Dr. Jorgen lives, she wanted to go with him. They refused, and she explained that after being forced to shrink, Dr. Jorgen had written her an apology because his invention had been used wrongfully on her, and he invited her to join his colony. However, she couldn't afford the trip. They felt sorry for her and decided to bring her with them. The four of them set off on a long journey aboard Paul's boat. Along the way they encountered Dr. Jorgen and his wife on their yacht, and he informed them of his terrifying discovery. Humanity faces an uncertain future, as the positive feedback loop of Arctic methane emissions is unstoppable and could ultimately lead to the extinction of the human race. With deep thoughts of dying, Paul and Lan shared their feelings before it was too late. Upon arriving at the first colony, Paul learns that Dr. Asbjornsen had anticipated such a scenario, and created a large vault within a mountain to protect the colony and preserve humanity in the event of an extinction. Their descendants would emerge when the surface environment stabilizes in approximately 8,000 years. Everyone has faith in Dr. Jorgen and supports him, and Paul is amazed by the speech. Eager to explore the vault, Paul invites Lan Tron to join him, but she declines, insisting that he doesn't need to enter the vault and can make a difference in their community by returning. Paul decides to go into the vault because once the doors are sealed, they won't open for the next 8,000 years. Ultimately, as the vault door begins to close, Paul changes his mind, opting to leave with Lan, Doosan, and Conrad. Back in Leisureland, Paul helps Lan Tran with her efforts to provide essential aid and supplies to the people living in the slums, and that's where the film ends.